Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode brought to you by your host, Debo Knows. In this week's episode, we will look at the designing of user interfaces and how interfaces we use today would look back in the 80s and 90s. Back when the interfaces were simpler, but the constraints in the technology made these interfaces universally approachable. There was not much thinking on the user's end to accomplish the goal of the program that they were using. So the technology that I picked to emulate to the 80s and 90s is the new self-service kiosks that McDonald's has implemented at their restaurants. Customers today only have to use a touchscreen kiosk to order everything they want and pay for it, which eliminates human interaction, most human errors, and improves efficiency. This is McDonald's website today, and it pretty much shows you how this process would look. What it would look like. You come down, you click on what you want. It sends you to more about what the product is you just bought, you just selected, and then you can come down here and customize it how you want, and then go on to pay for it from here. But how would this look in the 80s and 90s if McDonald's decided to implement this ordering theory back then? So that's what we're going to look at today. So back in the 80s, simple text-based prompts were the norm for the interfaces. Questions would appear, the user would enter data and hit submit. With that being said, I created a little example of how I think that this would look for a self-service user interface at McDonald's back in the 80s. So this is how it would look. It comes up on the command line. Please enter the meal. The customer would look at the menu that is overhead of the counter, which is normally there, and then the customer would enter which meal that they wanted. So let's say that the customer just wanted meal number 3. They would hit it. Then the prompt would ask what drink they wanted, followed by asking what size that they wanted. The customer would be given, once they hit submit, the customer would be given an order number by the interface, and the system would send the order back to the kitchen. Once the order is completed, the customer's order would be brought to the counter, and payment would be taken there. The 90s interface technology is exponentially better than the 80s due to the use of simple HTML components. I created what I would think that this sort of interface style would look back in the 90s. So there would be a header that explains what the item is. So this is a Big Mac meal, and then the picture reaffirms the explanation of what the item is, and then there's a link at the bottom here that prompts the user to order this item if they wanted to order it. The customer would then enter what drink and size they would want. Those prompts would look similar to these here. Lastly, the customer would pay at the machine by inserting bills like a vending machine. An order number would appear on the screen, and then the order would be sent back to the kitchen, and it would be announced when at the counter when the order is made. So it's pretty hard to think about these technologies, especially interfaces from back in time when people like myself never experienced them. So when you do think about it, it does give you an appreciation for what we have now, but it also teaches lessons on how interfaces should be designed today, which is simpler. I would like to thank you guys for watching this week's episode of Debo Knows, and I look forward to seeing you guys all back here next week. Thank you.